Packing up your gear, heading out into the wilderness and just disconnecting from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The fresh air, the crackling campfire, the canopy of stars overhead, it's an experience that's meant to rejuvenate the soul. Camping is supposed to be a peaceful escape into nature, but sometimes it turns into a nightmare. Here are the 6 most disturbing camping encounters ever caught on camera. These aren't your typical campfire tales designed to give you a little spook before you zip up your sleeping bag. No, these are moments where the veil between a relaxing getaway and pure, unadulterated terror was ripped away. And thankfully, or perhaps terrifyingly, someone had a camera rolling. We're talking about encounters that defy easy explanation. Events that leave you questioning what really lurks in those deep, dark woods when the sun goes down and the comforting sounds of civilization fade into an unnerving silence. So grab a warm drink, maybe pull that blanket up a little tighter, because today we're diving deep into a collection of stories that will make you think twice before your next trip into the great outdoors. These are the moments where the tranquility of nature was shattered by something strange, dark, and utterly mysterious. Prepare yourselves, because these accounts are genuinely unsettling, and they all happened when people least expected it, under the supposedly watchful eyes of the moon and stars. Our first story takes us to a dense forest in the Pacific Northwest, where a group of friends, let's call them Mark, Sarah and Ben, decided to go for a weekend camping trip. They were experienced hikers, familiar with the area, or so they thought. They'd set up their camp in a small clearing, miles from any known trail, seeking that true sense of isolation. The first day was idyllic sunshine, laughter, the usual camaraderie. But as dusk began to settle on that first evening, a subtle shift occurred. It started as just a feeling, that primal instinct that tells you you're not alone, that unseen eyes are fixed upon you. Mark mentioned it first, a casual, anyone else feel like we're being watched? Sarah and Ben brushed it off, attributing it to the unfamiliar sounds of the forest at night, or perhaps just an overactive imagination. But the feeling didn't dissipate. If anything, it intensified. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze seemed to carry a weight, a deliberate quality that set their nerves on edge. They tried to ignore it, focusing on their campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, but the perimeter of their flickering firelight felt like a shrinking sanctuary against an encroaching, unseen presence. Ben, who had brought along his video camera to document their trip, even panned around the dark tree line a few times, half jokingly, half seriously, trying to catch whatever was giving them the creeps. The footage from those moments just shows the impenetrable blackness of the woods, but you can hear the unease in their voices. The forced laughter that didn't quite mask their growing anxiety. Then it happened. Sarah had gotten up to grab another log for the fire, her back to the deep woods. Mark was looking in her general direction, and Ben was idly filming the flames, when Mark suddenly froze, his eyes wide, fixed on a spot just beyond Sarah, deep in the shadows of the towering pines. He let out a choked gasp and pointed. There, for just a fleeting moment, illuminated by a stray flicker from the campfire that danced further than the others, was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally so, and slender, more a silhouette than anything distinct, but it was unmistakably humanoid. It stood motionless for a second, a dark shape against the slightly less dark backdrop of the ancient trees, before it seemed to simply melt back into the deeper darkness, vanishing as quickly and silently as it had appeared. They saw it, or at least Mark was certain he did, and the camera, though not perfectly focused, caught a flicker of movement and an indistinct shape that, when analyzed later, sent chills down their spines. Next, we journeyed to a remote campsite nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains. A young couple, Emily and David, were seeking a romantic getaway, far from the noise of the city. They had hiked for hours to reach a secluded spot by a babbling creek, congratulating themselves on finding such a pristine location. The first night was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of nature lulling them to sleep. However, the tranquility was shattered on their second night. It began subtly, around what they guessed was 2 or 3 a.m. Emily was stirred from her sleep by a sound she couldn't quite place. It wasn't an animal, not a deer, nor a raccoon, nor any of the usual forest critters they were accustomed to hearing. It was different. She lay there in the pitch-black tent, her heart beginning to thump a little faster, straining her ears. The sound came again, low and guttural, almost like a series of clicks or soft, drawn-out whispers, but too indistinct to make out any words. It seemed to be coming from multiple directions, circling their tent. She nudged David awake, her voice trembling as she asked if he heard it too. He listened, initially skeptical, but then his face tensed. He heard it. The sounds were rhythmic, almost conversational, yet utterly alien. They weren't animalistic growls or chirps. They had an intelligent, albeit disturbing, cadence. The fabric of their tent suddenly felt paper-thin, offering no real protection from whatever was out there, methodically moving around their small, vulnerable shelter in the vast, dark wilderness. David, trying to be brave, cautiously unzipped the tent flap just a crack, peering out with a flashlight he'd grabbed. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar trees and bushes, but revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Yet the moment the light was on, the noises would stop abruptly, as if whatever was making them was aware of the light and didn't want to be seen. He'd turned the flashlight off, and after a few minutes of tense silence, the eerie clicking and whispering would resume, sometimes closer, sometimes further away, playing a terrifying game of cat and mouse. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, sleepless, listening to the spine-chilling, unexplained noises that seemed to emanate from something lurking just inches away, hidden by the impenetrable darkness. The audio recorder they'd left running to capture nature sounds picked up the faint, disturbing whispers, a chilling testament to their terrifying night. This next account is one that taps into a very specific and for many a very potent fear. We're talking about clowns. Not the friendly circus kind, but the kind that appears where it absolutely shouldn't, a painted grin in the dead of night, miles from civilization. A group of 4 college students, 2 guys and 2 girls, were camping in a state park in Ohio, a popular spot, but they had chosen a more remote loop of the campground. It was late October, a bit chilly, and the park was mostly empty. They were having a good time, typical college kids, music playing softly, a few beers, enjoying the break from studies. They had a decent fire going, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. It was around 11 p.m. when one of the girls, let's call her Jessica, needed to use the restroom, which was a small outhouse structure about 100 yards away, up a slight incline and just past a small clearing. She grabbed a flashlight and told her friends she'd be right back. As she walked, she later recounted how the woods felt particularly quiet that night, almost too quiet. She reached the clearing, a small moonlit patch of grass, before the path dipped towards the outhouse. And that's when she saw him. Standing at the far edge of the clearing, partially obscured by a large oak tree, was a figure. At first, she thought it might be another camper, maybe lost, but as her flashlight beam settled, her blood ran cold. It was a clown. Not a subtle one either, bright, garish makeup, a ratted rainbow wig, and a dirty, oversized suit. And the smile. Oh, the smile was painted wide and grotesque, unmoving, yet somehow deeply menacing in the pale moonlight and the wavering beam of her flashlight. Jessica froze, every horror movie trope flashing through her mind. The clown didn't move. Didn't speak, just stood there, one hand slightly raised in a parody of a wave, its painted eyes seemingly fixed on her. She couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, a primal fear took over, and she turned and sprinted back towards her campsite, screaming for her friends. Her friends, initially confused, saw the sheer terror on her face and grabbed their own flashlights. One of them had a small action camera mounted on a stick, which he'd been using to film their antics earlier. He instinctively pointed it towards the clearing as they cautiously approached. The footage is shaky, dark, but for a split second, as the beam catches the edge of the clearing, you can see a flash of color, something misshapen and out of place before it vanishes behind the tree. They found no one, no footprints, nothing. Just the chilling memory of a painted smile in the dark. Chapter 4. The Silent Observers Above. Our fourth story takes us to the arid desert landscape of Arizona, where a seasoned camper named Alex was on a solo expedition. Alex loved the stark beauty of the desert and the unparalleled view of the night sky it offered, far from city lights. He'd set up a very minimalist camp, just a bivy sack, a small stove and his camera equipment, hoping to capture some stunning astrophotography. He was about 2 hours into his stargazing, camera clicking away on its tripod, capturing long exposures of the Milky Way, when he noticed something odd. It wasn't a star, not a plane, not a satellite. He knew what those looked like. These were lights, 3 of them arranged in a perfect triangular formation, and they were completely silent. Alex watched, fascinated and increasingly uneasy, as these lights moved slowly, deliberately across the vast expanse of the desert sky. They weren't blinking like aircraft navigation lights. They emitted a steady, soft, orange glow. What was most unsettling was their movement. They maintained their perfect triangular formation, gliding without a sound, sometimes pausing, then changing direction with a fluid grace that defied conventional aerodynamics. He quickly repositioned his camera, adjusting the settings to try and capture them. The long exposure shots he managed to take showed 3 distinct glowing orbs, their light slightly blurred due to their movement, hanging silently above the silhouetted mesas in the distance. He felt a profound sense of being observed, not necessarily with malice, but with an intelligence that was palpable and utterly alien. For nearly an hour, these lights danced their silent ballet in the sky above him. He tried to rationalize it, military exercises, drones, but the silence was absolute, and the movements too precise, too otherworldly. There was no engine roar, no hum, nothing but the gentle desert breeze and the frantic thumping of his own heart. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the lights began to ascend straight up, accelerating at an incredible speed until they were mere pinpricks. And then they were gone. Alex was left standing alone in the immense silence of the desert, staring at the spot where they had vanished, his camera holding the only proof of the strange, unsettling sight of unexplained lights hovering above his campsite, leaving him in a state of profound shock and awe. Chapter 5. The Visitor by the Lake. This chilling account comes from a family camping trip in the dense woods of Maine, beside a remote, mist-covered lake. The Peterson family, Dad, Mum, and their 2 young children, aged 8 and 10, were looking forward to a rustic weekend. They'd pitched their 2 tents near the water's edge, the parents in one, the kids in another, just a few feet away. The first night was uneventful, but on the second night things took a terrifying turn. Around midnight, Mrs. Peterson was awakened by a strange sound. It wasn't an animal, she thought. It was more like a soft, almost mournful sigh, and it seemed to be coming from right outside their tent, near the children's tent. Her heart began to pound. She gently woke her husband, and they both lay there, listening intently. The sighing continued, interspersed with what sounded like faint, sorrowful humming. Mr. Peterson, armed with a heavy-duty flashlight, slowly unzipped their tent. The moon was partially obscured by clouds, and a thick fog was rolling in from the lake, creating an incredibly eerie atmosphere. He shone the flashlight towards the children's tent. At first, he saw nothing but the nylon fabric and the swirling mist, but then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw it. Standing, or perhaps hovering, just beside the children's tent was a figure. It was translucent, pale, and seemed to shimmer in the flashlight beam. It appeared to be the shape of a woman, draped in something long and flowing, her head slightly bowed. Mrs. Peterson, peeking over her husband's shoulder, let out a stifled gasp. The figure remained motionless for what felt like an agonizingly long time, seemingly unaware or unconcerned by the flashlight beam fixed upon it. The air grew cold, a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the night air. The parents were paralyzed by fear, their primary concern being the safety of their children just feet away from this apparition. Mr. Peterson finally found his voice, a choked, "Who's there? Get away from that tent!" As he shouted, the figure slowly lifted its head, and though they couldn't make out distinct features in its ethereal form, they felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair emanating from it. Then, as silently as it had appeared, it began to fade, dematerializing into the thick fog until it was completely gone. They rushed to the children's tent, finding them sound asleep, oblivious to the ghostly visitor that had been mere inches from them. The parents, however, didn't sleep another wink that night. The hair-raising image of the ghostly figure seared into their minds. Chapter 6. The Growl in the Shadows. Our final story is a stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying encounters in the wild come from the creatures that rightfully call it home, especially when those creatures are desperate or feel threatened. This incident happened to a lone backpacker, a man named Greg, who was trekking through a remote section of the Canadian Rockies. Greg was an experienced outdoorsman, always respectful of wildlife, and took all necessary precautions, including carrying bear spray. He was several days into his trek, deep in grizzly country, and had set up his small one-person tent in a clearing near a fast-flowing river, hoping the sound of the water would mask any minor noises he made. He'd meticulously stored his food in a bear canister well away from his tent, as per regulations and good practice. Late one night, Greg was jolted awake by a sound that every camper in bear country dreads, a low, guttural growl reverberating through the thin nylon of his tent. This wasn't a distant sound, it was close, terrifyingly close. His heart hammered against his ribs and he lay frozen, barely daring to breathe. He could hear heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel outside, accompanied by loud, huffing breaths. Then the growling intensified, angrier now, and he felt something massive brush against the side of his tent, causing the whole structure to shake violently. He knew with sickening certainty that a very large animal, most likely a grizzly bear, was right outside, investigating his campsite. He fumbled in the dark for his bear spray, his hands slick with sweat. The animal began to circle the tent, sniffing loudly, occasionally letting out those terrifying growls that seemed to vibrate deep in Greg's chest. He could hear its claws scraping against the ground, and at one point, a massive snout pressed hard against the tent fabric right near his head, its hot breath fogging the material. Greg was convinced this was it, that the bear was going to rip through the tent at any moment. He aimed the bear spray towards the most insistent pressure point and screamed at the top of his lungs, hoping to startle it. Then, with a sudden explosive roar, the bear lunged, and he felt a massive weight slam against the tent. He deployed the bear spray, filling the small space with the acrid orange cloud, but also hopefully hitting the bear. There was a yelp of pain and fury from outside, followed by the sound of something large crashing away through the underbrush. Greg lay there, shaking for what felt like hours, before cautiously peering out at dawn to see huge claw marks ripped through his tent, a horrifying testament to his close call with a wild animal that left him fearing for his life. Outro echoes in the wilderness, and there you have it, 6 stories that peel back the serene veneer of the great outdoors to reveal something far more unsettling lurking just beyond the firelight. From shadowy figures in the trees to inexplicable lights in the night sky and encounters that defy any logical explanation. These moments serve as a stark reminder that when we step into the wild, we're entering a world that operates by its own ancient rules, a world where we are merely visitors and sometimes unwelcome ones. The people in these stories went seeking peace and found something else entirely, something that undoubtedly changed their perception of camping forever. It's easy to dismiss these accounts when you're safe in your home, surrounded by the familiar, but out there in the vast, quiet darkness, when the only sounds are the whisper of the wind or the snap of a distant twig, the line between imagination and reality can become terrifyingly thin. These experiences, caught on camera, lend a chilling credibility to the age-old tales of things that go bump in the night. Always be prepared for the unexpected when you venture into the wild. Stay safe and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones you can't explain. Thank you for joining me, J.H. Maul, as we explored these creepy camping encounters. If you have a strange, dark, or mysterious story you think I should check out, you know where to find me. Until next time, be careful out there, because you truly never know what you might encounter when you decide to spend a night under the stars. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them after these tales.